Hello and welcome. The Amazonian myth is one of the most fascinating and enduring legends from the ancient world, representing a mysterious and powerful society of warrior women who defied the expectations of gender roles. According to Greek myth and historical accounts, these women lived in an all-female tribe, dominated in battle, and upheld a matriarchal order. Their fierce independence, skill in combat, and complex social structure challenged the norms of male-dominated ancient societies, inspiring both awe and fear among those who encountered or heard tales of their might. For millennia, the existence of the Amazons has been debated. Were they real? Did they exist in the form depicted in myths, or were they inspired by more grounded historical truths? The legend of the Amazons first entered Greek literature with Herodotus and Homer and continued to evolve in art, stories, and culture. However, recent archaeological discoveries have revealed startling insights into the possible reality behind these formidable women, showing that certain elements of the Amazon myth may not have been pure fiction. This documentary seeks to explore the rich history and mythology of the Amazons, examining their role in ancient societies and their legacy in modern culture. We will delve into their possible origins, the truth behind their martial prowess, and how they have been perceived through the ages. Our journey will not only take us through ancient Greece but also across the steppes of Central Asia, where some of the most significant clues about the Amazons' historical counterparts have been uncovered. Chapter 1: The Amazon Myth in Greek Literature. In the classical age of Greece, the Amazon myth permeated art, literature, and storytelling. These women, often described as living on the fringes of the known world, were depicted as equals to the greatest Greek warriors. They were considered both alluring and dangerous, a powerful symbol of female independence that defied patriarchal norms. Yet, they were also portrayed as an anomaly, existing beyond the boundaries of what was seen as the natural order of society. The most well-known references to the Amazons come from Greek epic poetry, particularly from the Iliad. In this grand narrative, Homer references the Amazons as Antionarii, a term often translated as those who fight like men. While brief, this mention captured the Greek imagination and cemented the Amazons as a formidable, almost mythological race of warriors. Later poets and historians, such as Herodotus, would expand upon these depictions, creating a more detailed and sometimes contradictory portrait of Amazonian society. According to these ancient stories, the Amazons were said to live in Scythia, on the fringes of the Greek world, often near the Black Sea or along the Thermodon River. They were believed to govern a matriarchal society, in which men held subordinate roles. The Amazons were said to either exclude men altogether or keep them for procreation purposes, sending male offspring away and raising only daughters. Some stories even claimed that these women would mutilate or remove their right breast to improve their archery skills, though there is no historical evidence to support such claims. In terms of warfare, Amazons were depicted as equals to Greek heroes. In the Iliad, one of the fiercest Amazonian queens, Penthesilea, arrives at Troy with her army to aid the Trojans in their war against the Greeks. She is a towering figure, depicted as both noble and tragic. In one of the epic's most poignant episodes, she is slain in battle by Achilles, who, upon removing her helmet, is struck by her beauty and feels deep remorse for killing her. This depiction of the Amazons as both worthy foes and tragic figures became a recurrent theme in Greek art and storytelling, where they were portrayed not just as bloodthirsty warriors, but as individuals of great courage, beauty, and complexity. The allure of the Amazon myth was not limited to the battlefield. In Greek art, they were frequently depicted on pottery, sculptures, and friezes, often engaged in combat with Greek warriors or gods. One of the most famous representations of the Amazon myth in Greek art is the Amazonomachy, a motif depicting the mythical battles between the Amazons and the Greeks. This image of noble combat became a central part of Athenian art, most famously illustrated on the Parthenon, where the battle between Amazons and Athenians symbolized the struggle between civilization and barbarism, order and chaos. However, despite their portrayal as outsiders, the Amazons were often depicted as parallels to the Greeks, suggesting a begrudging respect for their martial prowess and courage. But what was the purpose of these stories in ancient Greek society? To the Greeks, the Amazonian myth served as both a fantasy and a cautionary tale. While the Amazons represented a thrilling and exotic vision of powerful women, they also challenged the patriarchal structure of Greek society. By situating these women at the margins of the known world, Greek writers and storytellers placed them in a realm of fantasy, one that simultaneously allowed for admiration and condemnation. The fact that they were almost always defeated by male heroes, such as Achilles or Heracles, reinforced the notion that, ultimately, the male-dominated order would prevail. Yet the very existence of these tales suggests that the idea of powerful, independent women captured the Greek imagination in profound ways, hinting at an underlying cultural tension regarding gender roles. The Amazons' mythology also intersected with historical accounts. Herodotus, often referred to as the father of history, wrote of a nomadic tribe of women warriors living on the Pontic-Caspian steppe. His accounts suggest that the Amazon myth may have roots in real-life encounters with Scythian and Sarmatian warrior women, peoples who inhabited the regions around the Black Sea and Central Asia. Whether or not the Greeks encountered these fierce horsewomen, the myth of the Amazons spread across the Mediterranean and into later historical periods. While the Amazons of Greek myth may have been born from a blend of fantasy, cultural anxiety, and historical observation, their story is one that resonated deeply within the Greek psyche. It encapsulated a deep admiration for martial prowess, a fascination with the unknown, and a confrontation with the boundaries of gender. As we move beyond the Greek world in subsequent chapters, we will uncover the extent to which these mythological Amazons may have been inspired by real, historical warrior women, whose legacy still resonates today. Coming up in Chapter 2, Historical Evidence, Amazons in the Archaeological Record. In the next chapter, we will explore archaeological discoveries that suggest the Amazons may not have been entirely mythical. From the tombs of female warriors unearthed in the Eurasian steppes to DNA evidence linking them to Scythian tribes, we'll investigate how the myth of the Amazon reflects historical realities. Chapter 2: Historical Evidence, Amazons in the Archaeological Record. The Amazons have long occupied a hazy realm between myth and history. For centuries, scholars and historians debated whether these warrior women were purely a figment of Greek imagination or if they had some basis in reality. While the Greeks themselves depicted the Amazons as a distant and almost mythical people, recent archaeological discoveries across Eurasia have suggested that the idea of warrior women was not entirely mythical. Through the study of burial sites, weapons, and DNA analysis, we now have tangible evidence that may connect the Amazons to real, historical tribes of warrior women, particularly those who lived in the regions surrounding the Black Sea and Central Asia. The Scythians and the nomadic warriors of the steppes. One of the most compelling sources of evidence for the existence of warrior women comes from the nomadic tribes of the Eurasian steppe, specifically the Scythians and the Sarmatians. These tribes, whose territories stretched from the Black Sea to the Altai Mountains in Siberia, were known for their mastery of horseback riding and archery, skills that closely align with the descriptions of Amazons in Greek myth. Unlike the sedentary, agricultural societies of ancient Greece, these nomadic groups were constantly on the move, living off the land and relying on their ability to defend their territories through warfare. It is within these societies that we find evidence of female warriors. Ancient Greek historians such as Herodotus described the Scythians as fearsome fighters, and he specifically noted the presence of women warriors among them. The Scythians had a fluid social structure that allowed women more freedom compared to the strictly patriarchal societies of ancient Greece. As a result, it was not unusual for women in these cultures to take up arms and fight alongside men, particularly in times of conflict. This blurring of gender roles, especially in combat, likely influenced Greek depictions of the Amazons, reinforcing the idea that these women warriors lived on the fringes of the Greek world. Tomb discoveries, unveiling female warriors. One of the most significant archaeological breakthroughs came from the discovery of ancient burial sites in the steppes of modern-day Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and southern Russia. Over the past few decades, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of Scythian and Sarmatian women buried with weapons, including bows, arrows, spears, and swords, as well as with horses, symbols of their warrior status. These tombs, known as kurgans, were often richly furnished, indicating the high status of these women within their communities. In one such discovery in the 1990s near the town of Pokrovka, on the Russian-Kazakh border, archaeologists found the graves of several women buried with a variety of weapons. One of these women, believed to have been between 16 and 20 years old at the time of her death, was found with an iron sword, a bow, and a quiver of arrows. Her remains showed signs of muscular development in her arms and shoulders, suggesting she had spent much of her life training for combat. The evidence from this site, along with similar discoveries throughout the steppes, challenges the notion that women in ancient societies were solely relegated to domestic roles. Instead, it suggests that in certain cultures, women played an active role in warfare, much like their Amazonian counterparts in Greek mythology. Another notable find occurred in 2019 when a team of Russian archaeologists uncovered the remains of 4 Scythian women warriors in a tomb in the western Russian region of Voronezh. The women, who ranged in age from early adolescence to their late 40s, were buried with swords, arrowheads, and horse harnesses, further reinforcing the idea that women warriors were not an anomaly in Scythian society but were instead integrated into the warrior culture from a young age. One of the women had been buried in a position usually reserved for royalty, suggesting her high status within the tribe. Her skeleton bore marks of battle wounds, and a gold headdress indicated she may have been a figure of significant importance, perhaps even a queen or a chieftain. These discoveries have added weight to the theory that the Scythians and related tribes may have been the historical inspiration for the Amazon myth. The practice of burying female warriors with weapons and armor suggests that these women were not only skilled in combat but also honored for their martial abilities, much like the Amazons of Greek myth. DNA evidence and scientific analysis. In recent years, advancements in genetic analysis have allowed archaeologists to gain a more detailed understanding of the people buried in these kurgans. In many cases, DNA testing has confirmed that some of the individuals buried with weapons were indeed female, challenging earlier assumptions that such graves must have belonged to men. This finding has forced historians to reconsider long-standing biases about the roles of women in ancient societies, especially in cultures where gender roles were more fluid. A study published in 2020 analyzed DNA samples from 13 Scythian burial sites in the Altai Mountains, revealing that over 1/3 of the warrior graves belonged to women. This suggests that female warriors were not exceptional, but rather a significant part of these nomadic cultures. These findings provide a strong parallel to the Amazon legends, where women were not only present on the battlefield but also led armies and engaged in combat alongside men. The DNA evidence has also helped historians map the migration patterns of these warrior tribes, shedding light on how the idea of the Amazons may have spread from the steppes into the Mediterranean world. The Scythians were known to have traded and occasionally fought with Greek colonies along the Black Sea, providing a possible point of contact between the two cultures. It is likely that these interactions, whether through trade, warfare, or storytelling, contributed to the formation of the Amazon myth in Greek culture. Cultural exchange and the Amazon myth. While the Scythians and Sarmatians provide the most direct historical analogues to the Amazons, the cultural exchange between the Greeks and their neighbors likely played a key role in shaping the myth. As Greeks encountered Scythian warrior women, either through battle or diplomacy, they may have woven these real-life figures into their mythology. The Greeks often positioned the Amazons as outsiders, living on the edges of the known world, in much the same way they viewed the Scythians as exotic nomads from the far reaches of the steppe. Interestingly, Scythian and Sarmatian women warriors were not the only historical figures to inspire Amazonian myths. Throughout history, various other cultures, such as the Thracians and the Hittites, also produced female warriors who may have contributed to the Amazon legend. The Thracians, in particular, were known to fight alongside the Greeks in various wars, and their depictions of women in battle closely aligned with Amazonian imagery. The Amazons of reality and myth. The archaeological evidence strongly suggests that while the Amazons of Greek myth may have been exaggerated or romanticized, they were not entirely fictional. The warrior women of the Eurasian steppes, especially those of the Scythian and Sarmatian cultures, provide a historical basis for the legend. These women were highly skilled warriors, trained in horseback riding and archery, and held positions of power within their societies. Through the discoveries of female warrior graves, coupled with the growing body of genetic evidence, we now have a clearer understanding of how the Amazon myth may have originated from real historical encounters. These warrior women, who defied traditional gender roles and fought alongside men, have left a lasting legacy that continues to capture the imagination of modern audiences. Coming up in Chapter 3, Amazonian Queens and Their Legends, the stories of Penthesilea, Hippolyta, and beyond. In the next chapter, we will dive into the legendary figures of Amazonian queens who left their mark on ancient mythology and history. From their battles with Greek heroes to their representation in literature and art, we will explore how these queens shaped the perception of Amazons for centuries to come. Chapter 3: Amazonian Queens and Their Legends, Penthesilea, Hippolyta, and beyond. The Amazons, while portrayed as a collective of fierce warrior women, were often led by powerful queens whose legendary exploits became central to their mythos. These queens, with their strength, wisdom, and martial prowess, were depicted as equals to the greatest male heroes of Greek myth, challenging the traditional gender roles of their time. Among the most famous of these queens are Penthesilea, Hippolyta, and Antiope, figures who not only fought in epic battles but also embodied the ideals of Amazonian society. This chapter delves into the stories of these queens, their encounters with Greek heroes, and how their legends have endured through time. Penthesilea, the tragic queen of Troy. Perhaps the most well-known Amazon queen in Greek mythology, Penthesilea's story is one of heroism, loyalty, and tragic fate. She first appears in the epic cycle surrounding the Trojan War, most notably in post-Homeric accounts of the Iliad. As the war dragged on, and after the fall of Hector, Penthesilea led her army of Amazons to aid the Trojans in their defense against the Greeks. Penthesilea's arrival at Troy was an act of both valor and redemption. According to legend, she had accidentally killed her sister Hippolyta during a hunting accident, an event that haunted her deeply. Seeking a way to atone for her guilt, she threw herself into the war, hoping to find death on the battlefield. Her decision to fight for Troy was not just an act of solidarity with the besieged city, but also a personal quest for salvation. With her army of Amazons, she rode into battle, wielding a spear and shield, her prowess unmatched on the field. In the myth, Penthesilea's greatest and final battle is against Achilles, the mightiest of the Greek warriors. The two engage in single combat, and while she fights fiercely, she ultimately falls to Achilles' spear. However, her death is not the end of her legend. When Achilles approaches her fallen body and removes her helmet, he is struck by her beauty and grace, feeling deep remorse for having killed such a noble and formidable opponent. Some versions of the myth suggest that Achilles even fell in love with her in that moment, though it was too late for any reconciliation. Penthesilea's story has been interpreted in many ways, both as a cautionary tale about the limits of female power in a male-dominated world and as a tragic reminder of the cost of war and glory. She embodies the dual nature of the Amazons, warriors whose strength rivals that of men, yet who are also subject to the same tragic fates that befall other heroes of Greek mythology. Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazon belt. Hippolyta, another central figure in Amazonian lore, is known primarily through her association with the Greek hero Heracles, Hercules, and the ninth of his famous 12 labors. According to the myth, Hippolyta possessed a magical girdle, or belt, given to her by the god Ars, a symbol of her power and authority over the Amazons. For his ninth labor, Heracles was tasked with obtaining this belt for Admete, the daughter of King Eurystheus. In some versions of the story, Hippolyta is initially willing to give Heracles the belt, recognizing his heroic status and seeking to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. However, the goddess Hera, always seeking to sabotage Heracles, disguises herself as an Amazon and spreads rumors that Heracles intends to abduct Hippolyta. This sparks a battle between the Greeks and the Amazons. In the ensuing conflict, Hippolyta is either killed by Heracles or slain by one of her own warriors, depending on the version of the myth. The story of Hippolyta reflects the complex relationship between the Greeks and the Amazons. While she is portrayed as a noble and wise leader, her eventual defeat at the hands of Heracles reinforces the narrative that even the strongest women are ultimately no match for the greatest male heroes. Despite this, Hippolyta's legend lived on as a symbol of Amazonian power and resilience. In later adaptations, including modern interpretations, her character is often reimagined as a leader who commands respect and admiration, even in the face of adversity. Hippolyta's influence extends beyond her encounter with Heracles. In some myths, she is also said to be the mother of Hippolytus, the ill-fated hero whose tragic story is told in Euripides' play Hippolytus. According to this version of the myth, Hippolyta has a relationship with Theseus, the king of Athens, and gives birth to Hippolytus. However, in other versions of the myth, Hippolyta's sister Antiope is said to be the mother of Theseus's child, reflecting the fluidity of Amazonian legends and their many interpretations. Antiope, the warrior queen who loved a Greek. Antiope is another Amazon queen whose story is closely intertwined with the Greek hero Theseus. While the details of her myth vary, the central narrative revolves around her abduction by or voluntary union with Theseus, the king of Athens. According to some versions of the myth, Theseus accompanied Heracles on his journey to retrieve Hippolyta's girdle, and during the conflict with the Amazons, he abducted Antiope and took her back to Athens as his bride. In other versions, Antiope falls in love with Theseus and willingly leaves her Amazonian sisters to be with him. This aspect of the myth is particularly interesting, as it portrays an Amazon willingly abandoning her life of independence and warfare for the love of a Greek hero, a theme that contrasts sharply with the usual depiction of Amazons as fiercely independent and resistant to male domination. However, Antiope's story does not end with her abduction or marriage. The Amazons, enraged by Theseus's actions, launched an attack on Athens in an event known as the Amazonomachy, a battle between the Amazons and the Athenians. Antiope's role in this conflict varies. In some versions, she fights alongside her Amazonian sisters, only to be tragically killed by Theseus or an Athenian soldier. In other versions, she sides with Theseus against her own people, ultimately meeting her death in the battle. Antiope's story highlights the tension between love and loyalty, between individual desires and societal expectations. Her union with Theseus represents a rare moment in Greek myth where an Amazonian queen forms a bond with a male hero, but this bond ultimately leads to her downfall. Her story serves as a reflection of the challenges faced by women who straddle the line between autonomy and traditional gender roles. Thalestris, the Amazon Queen and Alexander the Great. Thalestris, a less well-known Amazon queen, appears in later legends and historical accounts, particularly in connection with Alexander the Great. According to a tale recorded by the historian Plutarch, Thalestris sought out Alexander during his campaigns in Central Asia. Fascinated by his military prowess and reputation, she proposed that they conceive a child together, believing that their offspring would inherit the strength and intelligence of both a great warrior queen and the world's greatest conqueror. The story of Thalestris and Alexander is often viewed with skepticism by modern historians, as it is likely a later addition to the Amazon mythos, meant to elevate Alexander's status by associating him with the legendary Amazons. Nevertheless, the tale reflects the enduring fascination with the idea of a powerful woman seeking out an equally powerful man to create a superior lineage. The legacy of Amazonian queens. The stories of Penthesilea, Hippolyta, Antiope, and Thalestris have survived for millennia, capturing the imaginations of ancient and modern audiences alike. These queens represent not only the power and independence of the Amazons, but also the complex relationship between myth, gender, and societal expectations. In a world where women were often relegated to the domestic sphere, the Amazons stood as symbols of female empowerment, even if their ultimate fate was often defeat at the hands of male heroes. These queens also embody the dual nature of Amazonian mythology. On the one hand, they are fierce and independent warriors, commanding armies and challenging the greatest heroes of Greece. On the other hand, their stories often end in tragedy, reinforcing the Greek belief in the natural order of male dominance. Despite this, the very existence of these tales suggests that the Greeks admired and respected the Amazons, even as they sought to contain their power within the confines of myth. As we move forward in our exploration of the Amazon legacy, we will examine how these legendary queens have influenced modern interpretations of the Amazons, from literature and art to film and popular culture. Coming up in Chapter 4, The Amazons in Art and Culture, from Antiquity to Modernity. We will trace the depiction of the Amazons in art and culture, from ancient Greek pottery and sculpture to Renaissance paintings and modern film, exploring how their image has evolved and been reinterpreted across the centuries. Chapter 4: The Amazons in Art and Culture, from Antiquity to Modernity. The Amazons, with their compelling blend of martial prowess, exoticism, and rebellion against traditional gender norms, have long fascinated artists, writers, and thinkers. From the earliest depictions in Greek pottery and sculpture to Renaissance paintings, and eventually into modern films and literature, the image of the Amazons has undergone significant transformations. Their portrayal reflects the changing attitudes toward gender, power, and heroism across different eras. In this chapter, we will trace how the Amazons have been represented in art and culture, and how their story continues to evolve in the modern age. Amazonomachy, the earliest depictions in ancient Greek art. The earliest visual representations of Amazons in art can be found in the form of Amazonomachy, or Amazon battles, a popular motif in ancient Greek vase paintings, sculptures, and temple decorations. These scenes often depicted the Amazons in combat with Greek heroes, particularly Heracles and Theseus, or participating in the Trojan War alongside the Trojans. The Amazonomachy was not merely an artistic trope, it symbolized the Greek struggle to maintain order in the face of chaos and barbarism, which the Amazons, as outsiders and challengers of the male-dominated order, represented. One of the most famous examples of Amazonomachy in sculpture is the Parthenon in Athens, where the battle between the Greeks and the Amazons was depicted on the frieze. The Amazons are shown as fierce warriors, armed with spears and riding horses, fighting against Greek soldiers in a closely contested battle. Their depiction is striking in that, although they are portrayed as formidable opponents, they are always on the losing side, ultimately reinforcing the Greek ideal of male dominance over women and barbaric peoples. Greek vase paintings from the 6th to the 4th centuries BCE also frequently featured Amazons. They were typically shown wearing the distinctive attire of foreign warriors, including trousers, which were seen as exotic by the Greeks, and pointed caps, riding horses, and wielding bows and spears. These early artistic depictions focused on the Amazons as noble adversaries, emphasizing their bravery and skill in combat, even as they were eventually defeated. The Greek fascination with Amazonomachy was not just about glorifying victory over a foreign enemy. It also symbolized the inherent tension between the male-dominated Greek polis and the more fluid, ambiguous gender roles embodied by the Amazons. The Amazons' rejection of traditional female roles and their ability to fight on equal terms with men made them simultaneously admirable and threatening in Greek eyes. Roman and Byzantine interpretations, Amazons as exotic others. As the Roman Empire rose to power, the Amazon myth continued to evolve. Roman depictions of Amazons often borrowed heavily from Greek precedents, particularly in sculpture and mosaics. However, the Romans added their own flair, emphasizing the Amazons' exoticism and otherness. They were often depicted with Eastern-style attire, reinforcing their role as outsiders from the fringes of the known world. These depictions were less focused on the Amazonomachy motif and more on the Amazons as symbols of foreign lands and peoples. In Roman art, Amazons were sometimes shown in more passive or even defeated poses, reflecting the Roman worldview of conquering and civilizing the barbarian others they encountered in their expansion. Still, there remained a sense of admiration for the Amazons' bravery, which resonated with the Roman ideal of martial virtue. In Roman literature, the Amazons occasionally appeared as romanticized figures, warrior women who could match Roman heroes in battle but were ultimately subdued or conquered. The Byzantine Empire, which succeeded the Roman Empire in the East, also preserved and adapted the Amazon legend. Byzantine depictions of Amazons, often in illuminated manuscripts and mosaics, retained the fascination with their exoticism. However, in Christian contexts, they were sometimes used as allegorical figures representing the dangers of female authority and rebellion against divine order, reflecting the more conservative attitudes toward gender roles in Byzantine society. The Renaissance and the rebirth of the Amazon legend. During the Renaissance, European artists and scholars rediscovered ancient Greek and Roman texts, leading to a renewed interest in classical mythology, including the Amazons. This period saw the Amazons reimagined through the lens of Renaissance ideals of beauty, heroism, and virtue. In paintings, sculptures, and literature, Amazons were often portrayed as beautiful, noble figures, blending their martial strength with feminine grace. One of the most famous Renaissance depictions of Amazons is found in the work of Peter Paul Rubens. His painting The Battle of the Amazons, circa 1615, portrays a chaotic, dynamic battle between the Amazons and Greek soldiers, with the women depicted as both beautiful and ferocious. Rubens's Amazons are caught in the heat of battle, riding horses, wielding weapons, and facing the horrors of war. The painting captures the duality of the Amazon myth. These women are powerful and autonomous, yet ultimately, they are doomed to be vanquished by the Greek heroes. Renaissance writers also embraced the Amazon myth, particularly in epic poetry and literature. Ludovico Ariosto's Orlando Furioso, 1532, an epic poem that became a cornerstone of Renaissance literature, features a warrior maiden named Bradamante, who echoes the Amazonian ideal of a woman who fights with the skill and bravery of a man. While Bradamante is not explicitly an Amazon, she embodies the same spirit of defying traditional gender roles and asserting female autonomy on the battlefield. In the Renaissance, the Amazons came to symbolize not only martial valor but also a challenge to patriarchal authority. Their portrayal in art and literature during this period reflected a complex interplay of admiration for their strength and beauty, alongside a reinforcement of their ultimate subjugation to male authority. The Enlightenment and gender debates. During the Enlightenment, as intellectual debates about gender roles, equality, and individual rights took center stage, the Amazons became a focal point for discussions about the nature of women and their place in society. Enlightenment thinkers were fascinated by the idea of an all-female society that operated independently of men, seeing the Amazons as both a utopian ideal and a cautionary tale. In some cases, Enlightenment writers used the Amazons as a way to critique the limitations placed on women in their own society. For example, the philosopher Montesquieu, in his satirical work Persian Letters, 1721, described an Amazonian society in which women ruled and men were subservient. His portrayal of the Amazons highlighted the absurdity of gender inequality, using the idea of female dominance to question the naturalness of male supremacy. At the same time, many Enlightenment artists and writers reinforced traditional gender roles by depicting the Amazons as dangerous and unnatural. In these depictions, the Amazons represented the consequences of allowing women too much power, suggesting that female autonomy led to chaos and disorder. Thus, the Amazons became a symbol of the ongoing tension between the emerging ideas of women's rights and the deeply entrenched patriarchal norms of the time. Modern interpretations: Amazons in film, literature, and popular culture. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the Amazons experienced a resurgence in popular culture, largely due to the rise of feminist movements and the growing demand for strong female characters in media. The Amazons became powerful symbols of female empowerment, independence, and resistance against patriarchal oppression. One of the most iconic modern portrayals of Amazons is in the Wonder Woman comics, created by William Moulton Marston in 1941. Wonder Woman, also known as Princess Diana of Themyscira, is an Amazonian princess who leaves her matriarchal society to fight for justice in the world of men. The character was explicitly designed to promote the ideals of female strength, independence, and compassion, serving as a role model for generations of women. Wonder Woman's origin story is deeply rooted in Amazonian mythology, with Themyscira depicted as a utopian society of warrior women who live free from the influence of men. The 2017 film Wonder Woman, directed by Patty Jenkins, brought the Amazonian mythos to a global audience, emphasizing the themes of female empowerment and heroism. The film portrays the Amazons as a highly skilled and disciplined society, trained in combat and committed to protecting the world from evil. The film's depiction of Themyscira as a paradise island untouched by war and corruption reflects the modern reinterpretation of the Amazons as symbols of strength and peace, rather than as the chaotic or dangerous outsiders seen in ancient Greek art. Beyond Wonder Woman, the Amazon myth has been reinterpreted in various forms of literature, film, and television. Novels like The Penelopiad by Margaret Atwood and Circe by Madeline Miller re-examine ancient myths from a feminist perspective, exploring the complexities of female power and autonomy, often referencing the Amazonian archetype. Similarly, films and TV series such as Xena, Warrior Princess and 300, Rise of an Empire feature Amazon-inspired warrior women who challenge traditional gender roles and embrace their martial strength. The enduring legacy of the Amazons. The Amazons' legacy in art and culture reflects the evolving views of women, power, and gender throughout history. From the ancient Greeks who saw them as noble adversaries to modern filmmakers who depict them as feminist icons, the Amazons continue to inspire and challenge audiences. They embody the tension between autonomy and oppression, between the heroic ideal and the limitations imposed by society. As symbols of strength, independence, and defiance, the Amazons remain relevant in contemporary discussions about gender equality and women's rights. Their image has transformed from the exotic warrior women of Greek myth to a representation of female empowerment in modern culture. Whether in ancient pottery or blockbuster films, the Amazons continue to capture the imagination of artists and audiences, standing as timeless icons of resilience, courage, and freedom. Coming up in Chapter 5, Amazons in the Real World, Archaeology and Historical Evidence. We will explore the fascinating discoveries that suggest the Amazons may have had a basis in reality, examining archaeological findings and historical records that point to the existence of female warriors in ancient cultures. Chapter 5, Amazons in the Real World, Archaeology and Historical Evidence. The myth of the Amazons has endured for thousands of years, weaving itself into the cultural fabric of Western civilization. Yet, while they were long considered purely mythical, archaeological discoveries and historical records suggest that the concept of Amazon-like warrior women may have roots in reality. This chapter explores the evidence that links the legendary Amazons to real-life cultures of female warriors, particularly among the nomadic tribes of the Eurasian steppes, and examines how these findings reshape our understanding of the Amazon myth. The Scythians, a culture of warrior women. One of the most compelling connections between the Amazons and real historical societies is found among the Scythians, a nomadic people who inhabited the vast steppes of what is now Ukraine, Russia, and Central Asia from the 7th century BCE to the 3rd century CE. Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian, wrote extensively about the Scythians, describing a society in which women sometimes fought alongside men in battle. His descriptions of the Scythian women closely align with the Greek concept of the Amazons, leading many scholars to believe that the two were linked. Modern archaeological discoveries have provided further evidence to support this connection. Excavations of Scythian burial sites, known as kurgans, have revealed the remains of female warriors buried with weapons such as swords, arrows, and spears. In many cases, these women were buried with the same honors as their male counterparts, suggesting that they held significant roles in their society. Notably, DNA analysis has confirmed that a substantial number of these skeletons belonged to women, dispelling earlier assumptions that all warrior graves belonged to men. These discoveries indicate that the Scythians practiced a form of gender equality, at least in terms of military roles, with women participating in combat and leadership. The Scythian women were highly skilled horseback riders and archers, much like the Amazons of Greek myth, who were frequently depicted as mounted warriors. The similarities between the Scythian female warriors and the legendary Amazons suggest that Greek traders, travelers, or soldiers may have encountered these women and embellished their stories, giving rise to the Amazon myth. The Sarmatians and other nomadic tribes. In addition to the Scythians, other nomadic tribes, such as the Sarmatians and the Sauromations, have been linked to the Amazon legend. These tribes, closely related to the Scythians, lived in the same general region and shared similar cultural practices. Like the Scythians, the Sarmatians were known for their skilled cavalry and warrior traditions, and historical records indicate that women in these societies also participated in warfare. The Sauromations, in particular, have a direct connection to the Amazon myth through Herodotus, who claimed that the Amazons, after being defeated by the Greeks, fled to the lands of the Scythians and intermarried with them, giving rise to the Sauromatian people. While this story is likely a fusion of myth and historical fact, it reflects the close ties between the Amazons of legend and the real warrior women of the Eurasian steppes. Archaeological evidence from Sarmatian graves also supports the idea of female warriors. As with the Scythians, female Sarmatian graves have been found containing weapons and armor, indicating that women played active roles in warfare. This practice endured well into the first few centuries CE, suggesting that the tradition of female warriors persisted for centuries in these cultures. The Dahomey Amazons, warrior women of Africa. While the ancient Greeks placed the Amazons in the distant lands of the Black Sea and beyond, other historical examples of warrior women have emerged from entirely different regions of the world. One of the most famous is the Agoge, the all-female military regiment of the Kingdom of Dahomey in West Africa. Known to Europeans as the Dahomey Amazons, these women served as elite warriors from the 17th to the 19th centuries, protecting the kingdom from external threats and playing a central role in Dahomey's military campaigns. The Agoge were renowned for their discipline, strength, and fearlessness in battle. European travelers and colonialists who encountered them during the 19th century were both fascinated and terrified by their prowess. Much like the Amazons of Greek myth, the Agoge lived in a largely female-dominated environment, trained rigorously in combat, and operated independently of men in many aspects of their lives. The Agoge's legacy was most recently brought to global attention by the 2022 film The Woman King, which dramatized the history of the Dahomey Amazons and celebrated their role in African history. While they were not directly connected to the Greek Amazon myth, the Dahomey Amazons reflect a similar archetype of the powerful, independent warrior woman, reinforcing the idea that the concept of female warriors transcends cultures and epochs. The Mongolian connection, archaeological discoveries in Mongolia. In recent years, archaeological discoveries in Mongolia have further expanded the understanding of ancient female warriors. Excavations in the Altai Mountains have unearthed graves of young women buried with weapons, horses, and other items associated with warfare. These women, believed to be from the Xiongnu or other nomadic groups that predated the Mongols, demonstrate that the tradition of female warriors extended across vast regions of Central Asia. Like the Scythian and Sarmatian women, these Mongolian women were highly skilled horseback riders and archers, capable of fighting alongside men in battle. Their presence in warrior graves challenges long-held assumptions about gender roles in ancient nomadic societies and suggests that the idea of women in combat was not an anomaly but rather an integrated part of life in these cultures. These discoveries in Mongolia, along with similar finds in other parts of Central Asia, support the notion that the Amazon myth may have been inspired by real historical examples of female warriors, whose bravery and skill became the stuff of legend. Historical accounts and the evolution of the Amazon myth. Beyond archaeological evidence, various historical texts also mention warrior women who may have influenced the Amazon legend. The Roman historian Ammianus Marcellinus, writing in the 4th century CE, described women among the Gothic tribes who fought alongside their male counterparts. Similar accounts exist of women warriors among the Celts and the Germanic tribes, suggesting that the presence of female fighters in ancient societies was not as rare as previously thought. The persistence of such stories in historical records, coupled with the archaeological findings across Eurasia, points to the likelihood that the Amazons of Greek myth were inspired by real women who defied the gender norms of their time. The Greeks, encountering these warrior women in their travels and battles, may have exaggerated their stories, transforming them into the mythical Amazons who became central to their mythology. The Amazons, whether purely mythological or based on real historical figures, have captured the imagination of countless generations. They have become symbols of strength, independence, and defiance against the limitations imposed by society. From ancient Greek pottery and sculpture to modern films and literature, the image of the Amazon has evolved, reflecting the changing values and attitudes toward women, power, and gender. In the real world, archaeological evidence and historical records suggest that female warriors did exist, particularly among the nomadic tribes of the Eurasian steppes. These women, like the Amazons of legend, rode into battle, wielding weapons and commanding respect as equals to their male counterparts. Their stories, passed down through generations, likely inspired the Greek myths of the Amazons, blending fact and fiction into a compelling narrative that has endured for millennia. Today, the Amazons continue to inspire new generations, serving as icons of female empowerment and challenging traditional gender roles. Whether through the lens of historical discovery or the imagination of modern storytellers, the Amazons remain a powerful reminder of the strength and resilience of women across time and culture. Their legacy, both mythic and real, lives on in the art, literature, and popular culture of the modern world, proving that the legend of the Amazons is truly timeless. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.